Welcome to episode 135 of the Startup Show. Today we are here in Zug and I am talking to the head of blockchain, Daniel Diemers, and we're talking about how it is to be a consultant, all about the technology of blockchain and the regulations, but also why it's so important to challenge yourself on an almost daily basis. Make sure to stay tuned. Welcome to episode 135 of the Startup Show. Today we are here in Zug in the Crypto Valley talking to Dr. Daniel Diemers, who is the head of blockchain and a partner at PwC. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really excited. As you know, we have about 80% startups and then 20% who are people from the ecosystem. So I'm very excited to have you. First, I would like to thank the people who helped me out prepare for the show. So this is Andrea Girasol, Patrick Allemann, I guess a good friend, and Philipp Rams-Ebner. So thank you very much for helping me out. Now, as usual on the Startup Show, it's your turn to introduce yourself to my audience. So we all know, the two people out there who don't know you. So
Thank you, Cédric. Thanks for the invitation. Great that you came all the way here to Zug, to the Crypto Valley. So I'm Daniel Diemers. I'm now 45 years old. I started off in the 8-bit scene in the late 80s when the internet was still kind of emerging. I'm super into technology. So in my academic years, I studied how digital is transforming society, economy. I also did my PhD on that. So I was studying, can trust really exist in completely virtual communities? So people who never met face to face, can something like trust develop there? I was then going to the startups. So I had two startups as an entrepreneur. Not very successful, unfortunately. That was late 90s, early 2000. And then after that, I went into consulting, and that's actually where I'm still today.
Yep.
I went into strategy consulting, working primarily financial sector, basically in Europe and Middle East.
a lot of students are watching this. So maybe you can explain to us what fascinates you about the job as a consultant.
Being a consultant is fast-paced.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change. Your learning curve always kind of resets after every project. And to be really true and honest, when I was an entrepreneur, I didn't have the skills that I have now as an accomplished consultant, and they would have probably helped me get a few turns and for a couple of roads better than I actually did. So I think the tool set, the skills that you learn as a consultant is pretty universal. You can do anything, afterwards. And I think it would have helped, and it definitely helps every entrepreneur, for him or her to get on a curve there.
Sure. What is it, let's say, if you look back on your career as a consultant and entrepreneur, are there any tips you would say, like, look at these 2 or 3 things before you start or during your start when you were like building your business?
Building business for me is often you're very focused on the product. It was the same with me. I was thinking 90% about the product, how beautiful it is, how it will change the world, and etc. But in hindsight, I was completely underestimating the importance of governance, the importance of managing investors. Investors are not just giving you money and then that's that, but you need to constantly basically manage your that side as well. And fundamentally, it's about marketing. You can have the most beautiful product in the world if no one knows about it. You're not going to go anywhere. So I think in hindsight, and that would be my advice, try to balance all these things much better and don't only focus 80-90% on the product.
Okay, cool. So now you're here at PwC Strategy End, leading the EMEA blockchain department. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an explanation or an overview. What are your daily tasks and what are you responsible for here?
Why do we actually have that role? It is fairly recent. I think was created about a year ago. There are several exponential technologies, and blockchain is one of them. And I think we all believe that blockchain will fundamentally change kind of the world, governments, the economy, corporations, how we treat data. So we created this role to basically coordinate a bit better what's happening in the blockchain universe. And my day looks actually pretty pretty normal, pretty standard. I still do a lot of client work. That's actually what I'm focused on most.
Yeah.
And then in that role, it's more of a coordinative role. So I try to see what is happening in EMEA, but what's happening globally. We have a lot of calls, we align, and we basically look, where are the trends going? How can we help our clients do more? But we're also very closely tied into the ecosystem. So we see ourselves as an ecosystem player, interacting with startups, with students, with academia to really bring it all to life.
Yeah. So let's get some of this inside knowledge. When you say, blockchain, you're currently looking what's trending, what's going on in the ecosystem. What do you see?
I would say the two most exciting things, one is technology, right?
Yes.
I mean, maybe 1-2 years ago, there were only so many blockchain technologies available. I mean, this is now currently ballooning. There's so many interesting blockchain approaches out there, and we try to be completely technology agnostic. So when we advise clients, when we do projects, we always try to start with a white sheet of paper and then really say which technology fits best for that use case. And in some cases, it's not even blockchain, which is then very disappointing for some client of ours because they say we want a blockchain. We say no, sorry, for this use case just doesn't make sense. Just use a normal relational database, or we'll set you up something that has the same features. I think technology is one of the most exciting things happening. But then the second one is, 2-3 years ago, blockchain was not really well embedded in the corporate world, to be true and honest. Not many large corporations, irrespective what industry, have really looked into that. Also, governments were not looking into that a couple of years ago. I think 2018 definitely is a year which I see a lot of corporations are stepping into the blockchain field. They usually start with, analyzing, doing some use cases, what can we do with it? But this year, a lot of them are getting really serious and putting a foot forward. At the same time, governments are doing that. And I think that's when it really gets now exciting, because something that was driven primarily by startups and individual entrepreneurs now enters kind of the corporate world. And those two, you could say worlds are clashing, but they're also coming together. And I hope something really good will come out of that. Yeah.
What are, let's say, most promising applications of the blockchain that you saw in the recent weeks or months?
I'm very honest. I think what we're currently having as a problem in the whole blockchain field is that most technologies and applications are Northern Hemisphere and kind of first world applications. I still believe that some of the most disruptive cases that you can see is probably Southern Hemisphere. So I'm talking Africa, South America, parts, of course, of Asia. And there's a couple of very promising use cases, both governmental, from NGOs, from companies, from startups. But the focus is not really that high on it. I mean, if you listen to the global buzzer on the global blockchain community ecosystem, it's not typically the key focus. So I hope also with my role and what we do, we try to push a bit that more into the front and center spotlight.
I sometimes receive now people who all of a sudden make an ICO, and now we need the blockchain, as you said before, like clients who think they need it and they don't need it. What are, let's say, the biggest misconceptions that these clients come with when they come with the idea of like, we need blockchain, or maybe they say we need the money from the ICO, I don't know. But what are the misconceptions that you see?
Well, I think you mentioned two things. One is a lot of small companies and startups come and just say, we want to do an ICO because we want to get 100 million, 200 million, 500 million. It would be good to have a startup and start with 500 million, of course. The other case, what you describe, is established corporations. They come, they say, we want to manage maybe our contracts in the company better. Should we do that on the blockchain, work on the use case for this? So these are in a way two separate things. We do advise ICOs, so we're very well, let's say, tied into also the global ICO community. I'm always skeptical, and this is maybe me as a failed entrepreneur, but also as a strategy consultant talking. I'm always super skeptical when I talk to people and they tell me, look, we don't have a really clear strategy. With strategy, I don't mean we have a rough idea where we want to go to, but something that you actually write down, and we don't have a business case, and we don't have, the company is not really fit for business immediately, so they kind of say, give us the money first, and then we do the thinking later. I'd be super skeptical about these kind of ICOs, because factually, if you're an angel investor or a VC fund, would you give in the same situation such a startup money? Probably not. Yeah. And you will look at the founders and you'll see what they have done before, but irrespective of that, I think the basics still count. So this is on the ICO side, but I think a lot is moving there, and I'm of course happy for every startup that raises money. I mean, back in the days when I did it, it was a super hard task to actually just get $500,000 or $1 million.
Sure. I mean, when you look at it, say on the other side now, we look a little bit on the downside or the misconceptions. Where do you see blockchain can add most value? Maybe even with a focus on financial services.
Well, financial services, I must say, was as an industry highly overregulated and overprotected. So there's not been that many disruptive plays, right? If you look at digital, how it transforms the economy, financial services is still one of the most, I would say, protected arenas compared to other industries. And there's a reason to that. And also, if you look at their IT, many banks and insurance companies run quite old IT systems, legacy systems, and I think that's really an open green field ready for disruption. And we see a lot of use cases in blockchain that really disrupt that. I mean, I was just talking actually yesterday with someone in San Francisco, a very well-known, famous company that does a blockchain. I'm not mentioning the name, but their business case is very simple. They do cross-border remittances on the blockchain. And I mean, I lived in Dubai for 4 years, and there's a lot of money flowing from Dubai to India, Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, Philippines, from workers there, right? And these are not the white-collar workers, these are blue-collar workers. But if you see how in the old remittance world, the remittance companies would take 20% of a transfer, it's a nice margin, but I mean, if now a blockchain solution comes and says, we can do it for a fraction of that, and the money is safe and secure and will arrive where it should, and maybe even faster than in the old system, great. I think that's an excellent use case for me. That is, in the end, win for the client and probably win for the entire financial services ecosystem. Of course, those companies who earned a lot of margins with that will have to reinvent themselves and maybe find new ways to generate value.
Talking about reinventing, one of the key questions that I got several times in the preparation was about PwC's main business right now is auditing, accounting, and this will be something that will be definitely disrupted by blockchain players. Is this something you're concerned about as PwC?
Absolutely. I mean, we're concerned, and of course we're trying to be rather thinking about this ourselves than wait for someone else to do that thinking for us. So obviously, the whole accounting and auditing world, which I'm not an expert of, I have to admit fairly. In the old days, this was probably even paper-based. So you had huge, probably binders and paper, and one of the, if you think of a global company that has, let's say, operations all around the world, that task must be really, really challenging, to get all the books aligned and all the numbers. I think even today in the digital world, this has probably become much, much better, with accounting software and all that stuff. But now with blockchain, I think there's a completely new chapter being opened. I mean, there is no reconciliation in a blockchain required because the blockchain does it for you, right? Yeah. There is a single point of truth that is not a single point, but actually a decentralized point of truth. So a lot of the key paradigms are changing. And I think the audit profession, and that's not just a problem of my firm, it's a problem that all accounting and audit firms have, needs to change and adapt to that. Yes. So, I mean, some things we already do from our global network of blockchain practitioners. We actually started to audit blockchain companies, which is a different thing, right? You're not going to look at all the nodes and check whether the data on all nodes is the same, but you're fundamentally auditing the protocol. You'll do individual analysis on how the blockchain is developed, how stable it is, if all the consensus mechanism is working. So there is work to be done on auditing blockchain. And I think in the future, people who choose between two blockchains and one will be completely audited and kind of approved by a global brand with a trusted brand, it will be looked at differently than something that just maybe two people been cooking up and said, we have the best technology and just go for it. No.
Yeah. Interesting. Now I would really like to talk a little bit about the regulations. First, let's say, to take this conversation to that direction, maybe are there, let's say, your top priorities in regulation? I mean, you're part now of the blockchain task force of Switzerland, like really on the top level of the government. Maybe you can explain to us, like, what is it that is the highest priority for you right now?
No, I think that's exactly the highest priority. So I'm very honored to be part of the task force of our Federal Council. And it's good we have that because I think it's going to become a key innovation advantage for countries who are to have laws, to have regulations around blockchain. And I think this is why it's so exciting. And this is a global phenomenon. You see regulators all around the world right now looking at blockchain. You see governments look at blockchain. There are laws being passed that will help, fuel kind of the blockchain economy. And I think this is the right moment to work on this. But it's very key, and we see maybe some examples in Asia. It's very key to not be too prescriptive and just forbid everything. And I call this the binary regulation approach. Right. It's either 0 or 1. But it's very key to, as regulators, to navigate that and make a crystal clear, workable, pragmatic regulation. Because ultimately, especially if you mention financial services, regulators always had to stay abreast with the developments of the banks, right? So banks were doing innovative new products, and then regulators had to catch up, and all these frameworks, Basel II, 3, 4, are kind of an outcome. But usually for regulators, don't underestimate that, it's hard because regulators don't have 20, 30 blockchain startup experts, among their ranks. They exchange with the corporates kind of on a case-by-case basis. They may have some global colloquiums where they meet other regulators and align. But I think it's really interesting. And then if you talk blockchain, it shouldn't be a national thing, right? Because blockchains ultimately are decentralized. Right. So what we actually would need is a supranational global framework that everyone can work with. I just hope that's going to be a good one, because I think the G20 just recently looked into that. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and for policymakers and regulation experts, I think this is the time now to really get acting on not just blockchain, but then broader also, of course, crypto. How do we deal with cryptocurrencies? It's an exciting times from that sense.
Absolutely. Like when you look at, let's say, on a global scale, where do you see, let's say, Switzerland? You see probably EMEA, maybe you also have a global perspective. How are we doing? It's pretty hyped, Crypto Valley, Crypto Nation. Is it true? Is it a hype internally?
Absolutely. No, I think the Crypto Valley is in a way a great success story, because sometimes it shows how just individual names and brands can really carry around the world. And probably like the Silicon Valley as a term is just something people never forget once you hear it the first time. It's a bit the same with the Crypto Valley. But there's also, I would say, substance to it. So yes, there's been a lot of marketing, a lot of buzz, but ultimately, you have a lot of very serious players here in Switzerland working on this, and you have an influx of even more that want to come here. And why do they come here? The same reason why innovation in general is being made in Switzerland or in all industries, not just blockchain. I think we're just geopolitically very lucky where we are. We have a very good way of regulating things, the government, quota, etc. So it just remains and stays very attractive. And I think the Crypto Valley activities, ecosystem adds to that. That's also why we are part of this and supporting this very actively. On a global scale, I would say I roughly see maybe 3 models. There's the model that you see in Asia. In Asia is from super enthusiastic and supportive to completely banning, right? So a 0-1, and it's very mixed, and some governments will have their good reasons to do that, but it's definitely an arena that needs a lot more involvement of the regulatory scene, I would say. Here in Europe, it's much more balanced. You can see that, countries like Switzerland, but also Liechtenstein, Germany, other places that are really trying to do a balanced approach. And then you have the US, which I think is as a market still very large and dominant, and you see it in the ICO figures. Very recently, the CFTC in Chicago was kind of the first to even actually step forward and say, we're going to take care of Bitcoins. And now the SEC has stepped forward, and I think that's great news. The more regulators are dealing with it and bringing out regulation that is actually pragmatic and working, the better for the global ecosystem. And that's also when the corporates, and this is maybe why these things are coming together, that's when the corporates are going to say, okay, let's really get into this field, because now we have the regulators kind of aligned with it.
Sure. When you look at, let's say, the trends, What is your personal expectation, let's say, for the next 18 to 24 months in terms, let's say, the acceptance of cryptocurrencies and decentralization of, let's say, national banks? Where do you see that in the next 24 months?
Well, it's very hard, right, to do these predictions, especially, I mean, just as you saw in the last couple of days, the Bitcoin made a little jump. I received so many Telegram messages and WhatsApp. People, shall I buy? Is this the beginning of it's very hard to predict, but I think fundamentally, we will see the blockchain technology evolve and get now really into the corporate field. So we'll see a lot of actual applications in the real world. I think on the ICO side, I don't think that phenomenon will go away. I think it's become already now an alternative for a classic alternative and VC funding. We see a lot of hybrid funding schemes. So hybrid would mean you would still do your odd 2-3 business angels. You would maybe still try to get some money from a fund or private equity company. But in addition, you do an ICO. This gives you kind of quite a nice effect because, I mean, let's face it, those who do successful ICOs, they actually master social media marketing very, very well, right? I mean, it's an achievement. They really manage to create out of their idea and their brand a global community of followers who kind of all decide, well, this sounds like a good thing. Why don't I chip in some money there? Which if you compare it to classic VC funding is very intransparent. It's very often local, so you have to stay close to them locally. And in that sense, ICO is very interesting. So we'll see more of that hybrid funding in the future.
Mm-hmm. What are, let's say, this is not investment advice, but what is your favorite cryptocurrency?
I'm still old school, so I think I love Bitcoin. I still think if you look at the governance, the technology, I still think it's here to stay. But obviously, and for the right reasons, there's a lot of other cryptocurrencies evolving. There's tokens, etc. So I'm not giving out any investment advice, no. But everyone has his own preferences.
Sure,
right? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. What are some tips for balancing work and life?
I think making the right priorities. I think in the beginning of the career, you're usually doing more work than life, but I think the longer you're in professional life, you need to switch it. With the exception of startups, most startups have a terrible work-life balance. I think as a startup person, as an entrepreneur, you need to fix it from day one.
What traits do you look for when you hire someone?
We actually look for curiosity, so curiosity of the mind, looking at things a bit different, and of course just being fast-paced and willing to travel also. For us, the international dimension is very important.
Mm-hmm. How do you test, let's say, curiosity in an interview?
It usually comes across. We do 6 interviews. Each interview is an hour, so we spend net about 7-8 hours with a person, I think, and then we compare all the insights from that. We need basically 6-7 thumbs up to hire a person.
Yeah.
So usually these traits, they step forward. Yeah.
Right. What would you like to see in the local, let's say, Crypto Valley ecosystem in the next 5 years?
I would love if we see more influx from abroad, more international entrepreneurs coming here. It's a great place to be here. And I truly believe we can only benefit as Switzerland from, more people from outside coming in, bringing their best ideas. But I also would like the Swiss population, so people who are already here, across all levels, right, to really embrace this new technology, blockchain in general. And I think we have a big to-do on the educational agenda. Mm-hmm. So I think if we would step out here in Zug and now ask randomly 10 people on the street,
what's Crypto Valley?
What's Crypto Valley and can you explain what the blockchain is? It would be an interesting experiment. You should do it probably. So we need to work on this.
Do you have a story of how you turned a failure into a learning experience?
I think every failure is a learning, but it usually takes some time to realize that. So yeah, I think the fail fast, fail often rings very true to me. Of course, in my job, when you're a strategy consultant, it's not what you communicate to the client, but of course I had failed projects. I did projects where I did beautiful strategies that were crafted that ended up in a drawer. It's a bit a cliche, but it actually happens. And as a strategy consultant, that frustrates you very much. And then years later, you'll think back and say, if they had executed that, or if that would have not been stuck in a drawer, it would have helped maybe that company or the world in general.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, who is your role model?
That's a good question.
I'm saying it very clearly, Elon Musk is taken.
No, actually, I'm not. I wouldn't name an entrepreneur. I would probably name either a politician or a religious leader, someone who's really put kind of the economical side of things a bit to the side and is trying to do really something good. But honestly, in 30 seconds, we would need probably a dinner to get to that name.
One name?
No.
It's hard, too hard.
No.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last moments are dedicated to leave some of your wisdom and legacy for the future generations.
Oh.
So if you could give us some of your wisdom, share it with us where you feel you're an expert, and give this advice to all the people out there.
Sure, very, very happy to. I think fundamentally, it's the curiosity, I think, that's really important, because even as a startup or as a student, you come out into the working world and you're usually very easily influenced by, you know, this opinion or that opinion. I think it's very important to stay true to yourself, stay curious, don't think, you know, the obvious thing is always the best thing, so try to work other ways. So I think challenge yourself intellectually. If you're stuck in a job that's not enriching you, sometimes you're stuck in a startup and you should maybe move on. And I think in Switzerland we're particularly not very good at that. We don't like to fail, so we often prolong the startup. Even though everyone knows it's a failure, we try to carry it on for a long time. You have just one life, so really use it. And if you think something's not working, you know, just admit it and do something else. And the second thing is, and I'm now in the middle of that. I mean, if you think of all the amazing exponential technologies that we're surrounded with, and blockchain is just one of them. You have artificial intelligence, you have drones and robots, quantum computers that are going to come that are knocking at our door. In the medicine and health field, there's a lot of things happening that I'm absolutely not qualified to comment. You know, how we can read DNAs, how we can probably fiddle with DNAs, CRISPR. I mean, there's so many things at Singularity University. I think they name about 100 different exponential technologies that are all interact with each other, right? So in blockchain, sooner or later we see AI applications, and maybe they will trigger things that robots or drones do, and that again will change maybe the way we do global logistics, or we distribute pharmaceuticals in the third world. So I think it's going to stay super important to keep an open mind and look at things interconnectedly. So I think someone who's just spending years and years on one technology may miss, you know, the bigger picture, may miss the interdependencies between the different technologies, and that's something that's driving me in these days very much. Because if we're really honest, I mean, back in, let's say, 1998, 1997, when we had the so-called internet bubble, technology-wise, it was not that super exciting compared to today. Yeah, we had a couple.
Slower pace.
It was slower pace. We had I mean, when we looked at the early version of the now World Wide Web, we wouldn't imagine that this will be a moving kind of, you know, world with pictures and animations, because just the bandwidth was so low. So I think keep an open mind, see the interconnectedness, and also stay curious to also look left and right of that field, what you think is maybe the best in the world, but stay open to look at other things.
I mean, you mentioned the stay challenged. Do you have any practical thing to do, like how to actually do that in real life?
Challenge yourself.
Yeah. Like, what do you do to challenge yourself? Like,
I challenge myself by actually taking the time to challenge, because sometimes you're so stuck in work and loaded, and your work-life balance is bad, that you actually never really question, you know, how did I perform last week, how did I do today in that meeting? That's one, but then most importantly, I think, you know, yes, it's a social media world. Yes, you know, you probably have an Instagram profile with millions of followers, but fundamentally, I think from a sociology point of view, from a psychology point of view, you will have a circle of people around you that's probably 10, 20, 30 people that really count for you in your life, and you have a bond with them. And I would say listen to their advice and listen to their opinion, because they like you, you know, no matter how many posts you do, and they will give you feedback. And I think I often try to really listen to that circle, even if they don't really know what I'm doing technically, they can still observe and give me feedback. So I think that's one advice I would give in this new kind of digital social media world, to still stick a bit with these bonds that you have.
So, Daniel, thank you so much for these insights, for your time, for your interview. Thank you very much, everybody who stayed all the way till the end of this video. I really appreciate your time. Make sure to stay a few more seconds so you'll see who is up next week, and I'll see you there. Have a great day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martin. I'm CEO and co-founder of Brixel. Make sure to tune in next Monday to see our show, and make sure to subscribe to the channel.